Claire Morgan had just stepped outside to water her plants when she froze. A man sat slumped against her porch railing, dirty, trembling, barely conscious. His clothes were torn, his face bruised. But when he looked up, something in his eyes struck her like lightning. He whispered, "Mom?" Claire's breath caught in her throat. The voice, raspy, unfamiliar, was wrapped in something hauntingly known. That scar above his brow, the way he said "Mom." Her knees buckled slightly. Could it be? After 14 years? She stepped closer, heart racing, torn between hope and horror. "Who are you?" she whispered. Before the video starts, comment where you're watching from and hit the like button if this story already has you curious. One that had once been labeled Ethan's college applications, but now bore no title. Inside, faded photos, timelines, phone records, a map of Bend and its outskirts, news clippings, even a list of known missing persons within a 100-mile radius over the past 20 years. Every few months, she revisited it, shuffling the papers as if a new order might reveal a new answer. When she was younger, this obsession had frightened her. She thought maybe she was losing herself. But with time, it became more like tending a wound, not to heal it, but to remember where it hurt. People had tried to suggest support groups, therapy, healthy grieving, but none of it applied. Those things were for people with funerals, graves, endings. Claire had none of those. What she had was a porch light that never turned off, and Ethan's voicemail still saved on her landline. "Hey, it's me. I'll call you back soon." The cruelest part was that she could no longer remember the exact sound of his laughter, but she could remember that message perfectly. Every syllable. Still, the ache had changed over the years. Where once it had burned, now it simmered, a quiet, constant undercurrent to her life. She no longer dreamed of Ethan knocking on the door. Now she dreamed of small things. Him reading in his room, asking for coffee, smiling while brushing snow off the windshield. The dreams weren't wishes anymore. They were memories repurposed into sleep. That morning, the morning she found the man on her porch, had begun like any other. Quiet, familiar, unremarkable. She had made tea, fed the neighbor's cat while they were away, and begun trimming the garden she had long neglected. She was just beginning to kneel by the rosebush when she heard the sound. A throat clearing. Soft, human, and everything changed. "I woke up in a warehouse bathroom in Stockton. No ID, no wallet, just this coat and a cracked watch. They said I probably hit my head. I didn't know my name, so I picked one. Miles." Claire's breath caught. Stockton was over 500 miles from Bend, her fingers curled against her palms. "Do you remember anything before that?" "Flashes," he said, squinting. "A red room, a chain-link door, screaming, someone screaming, a woman's voice." He rubbed his temple. "A song. I think that's something with piano." Claire felt something bloom in her chest, sharp and sudden. She had played piano when Ethan was young. "Do you know what song it was?" He shook his head. "It's there, but it won't come." They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers tied together by a thread only one of them could feel. Then, cautiously, she reached into her coat pocket and took out a photo, worn at the edges, a little curled from time. She slid it across the bench. It was of her and Ethan at a birthday party. He was 15. He wore a party hat and held a chocolate cupcake. Claire's arm wrapped around him. Both of them were laughing. He picked it up slowly, stared at it. "That's me," he said. Claire didn't move. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I don't know why, but I know that's me." His voice shook now. "Who was I?" "You were my son," she whispered. "Your name was Ethan Morgan." He dropped the photo. Claire caught it before it hit the ground. "This is where I don't know what to do with that," he said. "I want to believe you, but I don't remember anything real, just feelings, pieces. My head feels like someone else's dream." Claire looked at him, truly looked, and saw the war happening behind his eyes. The fear of being wrong, the terror of being right. "You don't have to remember all at once," she said, her voice trembling. "You just have to come with me." Before you begin, comment your location and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories that stay with you.
The night Ethan disappeared had always felt incomplete, like a story with the last chapter torn out. For years, Claire had combed through that day in her mind, trying to stitch together its scattered details, as if memory itself might yield a new truth if examined from the right angle. But the facts had always remained the same: stubborn, sparse, unresolved. It was a Friday, late October. Ethan was 20 in his second year at the local community college. He was majoring in sociology with a minor in music theory. He'd worked a closing shift at the campus bookstore, clocked out at 7:03 p.m., and texted her, headed to grab dinner, be home late, love you. That was the last message. Claire had waited up that night, as mothers do. She fell asleep in her armchair with the porch light on. When she woke at 3:14 a.m. to silence, she knew something was wrong. By morning, she had already called the police. The investigation began promptly. His car was found parked on a side street near the Deschutes River trailhead, engine cold. His backpack and wallet were still inside. His phone was discovered 2 days later, screen shattered, battery dead, by a jogger on the pedestrian bridge. There was no sign of struggle, no fingerprints, no witnesses. Police speculated he'd either fallen into the river or staged a disappearance. Claire rejected both theories. Ethan wasn't impulsive. He wasn't suicidal. He hadn't withdrawn, hadn't been acting strangely. If anything, he had been more focused than ever, talking about transferring to Portland State the next semester, asking about her favorite books again, making plans. There was one possible break. A clerk at a gas station 2 blocks from where the phone was found told investigators a young man matching Ethan's description had come in around 8:30 p.m. that night. He seemed nervous and bought a bottle of water and a cheap burner phone with cash. He didn't speak much. Then he left. But the security footage had been recorded over before police could retrieve it. That burner phone was never found. Claire kept that detail folded inside her, like a thorn she refused to remove. She didn't share it with neighbors or friends, not even with Patrick. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because deep down it suggested a truth she wasn't ready to face. That Ethan had run, or worse, had known something. 2 days after her first meeting with Miles, Claire sat at her dining table, surrounded by documents she hadn't touched in years. She had told him she needed time to gather things. She hadn't told him she was also trying to see the past through new eyes, his. The things he had said in the shelter courtyard lingered with her. The red room, the chain-link door, a woman's scream, a song with piano. They weren't dreams. They were memory fragments, distorted by trauma, maybe, but real. She reopened the file marked 2011, Case Notes, Day 4. A volunteer search team had combed the wooded area behind the river trail. One of the few pieces recovered was a broken headphone cord wrapped around a branch as if it had snagged there. Police dismissed it. Ethan had used Bluetooth earbuds. Claire had thought so too, until she opened one of the drawers in his old room and found the matching pair. Corded. Red and black. The missing buds still tangled with dust. She held them in her hands now, staring. Had he been running or pulled? Her landline rang. She startled. It was Detective Laura Finch, the only one who still sometimes called, even if only once or twice a year. Mrs. Morgan, came the calm, familiar voice. I heard from one of the volunteers at 3rd Street. She said you asked about a man named Miles, a drifter who saved a child. Claire hesitated. Yes, I met him. I take it there was something familiar about him? There was everything familiar about him, Claire said, voice trembling. I think it's Ethan. There was a long pause. Would you like me to come by? Claire closed her eyes. Yes. An hour later, Laura sat at the table across from Claire, her notebook open but untouched. Laura had changed since the early days, her hair now streaked with silver, her posture more guarded. But her eyes were still sharp, and they softened only slightly when Claire handed her the printout of the video still. Then a photo of Ethan at age 20. Then the photo Miles had held. Laura studied them all carefully. I can't say for sure, she said quietly, but it's possible. Claire leaned forward. If he is Ethan, what could have happened to him? Where has he been? Why doesn't he remember? That's the thing with trauma, Laura replied. Sometimes it's not just what happens, it's how long it happens, and how much of you it erases in the process. She reached into her bag, pulled out a thin file. You know, I couldn't let the case go. I kept digging off the record, and something came up a year ago. Not solid, just strange. A report out of Stockton, same city he said he woke up in. A noise complaint in an abandoned commercial lot. Officers found a makeshift dormitory inside. Beds, IV hooks, soundproofed walls. No arrests were made. It was cleaned out by the time real investigators arrived. But She slid a grainy black and white photo across the table. Claire stared. In the back of the image, behind a broken desk and a tangle of wires, was a metal chain-link door. The photo haunted Claire. She'd propped it against her teacup after Detective Laura left, unable to stop looking at it. The chain-link door, the unfinished drywall, the chair half buried beneath a tarp, each detail felt like a whispered answer hiding inside a scream. Was that where he'd been? Was that the red room he saw in his mind? How long had he been locked behind it? The questions pressed against her temples, throbbed behind her eyes. She needed help. Not from forums or Facebook groups, not from old friends offering casseroles and pity. She needed someone who had known Ethan as he was. Someone who could tell her whether the man calling himself Miles might really be the boy who once played saxophone in the high school jazz band and fell asleep in the back seat during thunderstorms. She needed Peter Lane, Ethan's best friend since 7th grade. Claire hadn't spoken to Peter in years, not since her husband's memorial, when Peter had come up quietly after the service and said, "If there's ever anything I can do," but never followed up. That hadn't been his fault, Claire now realized. Grief doesn't pass like a baton. It sinks everyone differently. He was now a licensed trauma therapist living on the east side of Bend, near Pilot Butte. Claire had Googled him. He worked part-time with a clinic that specialized in memory disorders and PTSD in young adults. That irony alone was enough to make her hands shake as she dialed his number. He picked up on the third ring. "Peter Lane speaking." "Peter," she said. "It's Claire Morgan." A pause. "Claire?" "I need to talk to you," she said. "It's about Ethan." Peter arrived at her house less than an hour later. He looked older, of course. His sandy blonde hair was grayer, thinner, his eyes more cautious. But when Claire opened the door, his expression softened into something familiar. They hugged briefly, then sat at the kitchen table. The folder was already there, along with the still frame from the video. Peter stared at it for a long time, then at her. "Where was this taken?" he asked. "Outside a shelter downtown. Last week." "He's alive?" "I don't know," Claire said. "But I think it's him. I met him. What he thinks is his name is Miles. He has no memory before 2 years ago. No records, no ID. But the way he talks, the way he moves, it's like watching Ethan in a different body." Peter leaned back, processing. "I've worked with amnesia cases. Sometimes trauma doesn't just block memory, it builds a wall so high even the person inside doesn't know they're missing." Claire hesitated. "Would you see him? You mean, as a client?" "As whatever you need to be." Peter paused. "I can try." They arranged to meet at the shelter. Claire contacted Miles again that evening, and he agreed, reluctantly, to a conversation. "Just a talk," he had said, voice flat. "No tests, no tricks." He didn't say why he agreed, but Claire had seen the flicker in his eyes after she showed him the photo of the jazz band, after she said, "You used to be first chair." He'd gone quiet, then murmured, "I used to play something, didn't I?" The next afternoon, Peter met him. The two men sat at a picnic table under the low shade of an elm tree behind the shelter. Claire stayed at a distance, watching but not interfering. She could only see their silhouettes, Peter's careful posture, Miles's closed-off stance, arms crossed. They spoke for 40 minutes. No raised voices, no dramatic outbursts, just steady, quiet conversation. When Peter returned to Claire, he looked rattled. "Well?" she asked. "He has Ethan's cadence," Peter said slowly. "His hesitation when he's uncertain, his eye contact when he's uncomfortable. But more than that, he mentioned a story we used to joke about. The Mrs. Templeton story." Claire frowned. "The librarian?" "He said he kept seeing a face in his dreams, a woman with purple glasses and a bun who smelled like vanilla. He said she always looked sad, like she wanted to say something but never could." Claire blinked, stunned. Mrs. Templeton had been the school librarian in middle school. Ethan and Peter used to say she watched you like a hawk in a cardigan. "She died their freshman year," Peter continued. "We made up this weird story about her ghost haunting the AV room. It was a running joke between us for years. We never told anyone." Claire felt something cold settle into her chest, part fear, part awe. "What else did he say?" "He remembers flashes, pain, restraint. He mentioned water dripping, metal under his back, and something strange. He remembers voices in another language." "What language?" Peter shook his head. He didn't know, but I recognized a few words he repeated phonetically. Claire waited. It was Russian. The room felt suddenly smaller, tighter. Claire stood up, moving toward the window. Peter joined her, his voice low. If that warehouse in Stockton is connected, if this was some kind of organized abduction. Claire turned. We need to go there. Peter nodded. I can make a few calls. I know someone in missing persons who might have connections in California. And if there's nothing left, then we find something they missed. Claire didn't say it aloud, but the thought gripped her. If Ethan had been kept there, someone put him there. And that someone might still be out there. This character deserves a like, but sadly, they haven't received one yet. They sat on opposite ends of the old piano bench in Claire's living room. Neither of them spoke for a while. The room was quiet, warm, filled with late afternoon light filtering through the lace curtains. A small ceramic lamp glowed near the bookcase. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and chamomile. Rufus, the neighbor's dog she often watched, curled on the rug nearby, asleep. Claire had invited Miles, Ethan, she still wasn't ready to say aloud, to her home for the first time since that day on the porch. He'd come hesitantly, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, shoulders curled in like a man used to disappearing into himself. Now he stared at the piano with unreadable eyes. This used to be yours, Claire said, nodding toward the upright. You were never very good at practicing, but when you did, the whole house got quiet. Miles blinked. Do I play? You did, she smiled faintly. You insisted on lessons when you were 8, quit twice, came back both times. He reached out and touched a key, C then G. His hand paused, as if listening for something inside the instrument, something lost. I dream about this sound, he said softly. Claire's breath caught. I didn't know what it was before, he continued. But now, maybe. Do you want to try? I don't think I remember how. Try anyway. He hesitated, then placed both hands on the keys, awkward at first, stiff. Then, 2 chords, almost melodic, stumbled out. He winced. Tried again. Another sequence, this one messier but not without rhythm. Claire closed her eyes. That was Ethan. He used to play like that when he thought no one was listening. Afterward, they sat at the kitchen table, cups of tea cooling between them. He glanced around the room, the chipped paint on the windowsill, the family calendar still pinned to the fridge, 10 years out of date. It's like nothing's changed, he said. Claire smiled gently. Not everything. He looked at her directly then. It was the first time he'd held her gaze without flinching. Why did you keep it all the same? She answered without hesitation. Because I was waiting. He looked down, fingers tightening around the mug. I'm sorry. She frowned. For what? For not remembering. For not being whoever you think I am. The words hit like a cold wind. You're not responsible for forgetting, she said firmly. Whatever happened to you, it was done to you. But what if I never remember, he asked. What if this version of me is all there is? Claire was quiet. Then she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. You're still mine, even if you don't remember. And we don't have to force it. We just have to stay. That night after he left, Claire wandered into Ethan's room for the first time in months. She hadn't touched it since the day she showed Peter the old photos. The scent of worn paper and dust lingered. On the dresser sat a small wooden box. She opened it. Inside were trinkets, a wristband from a concert, a broken guitar pick, a movie ticket from the night Peter snuck out to see The Matrix when they were 13. Beneath it, folded carefully, was a single page torn from a spiral notebook. Ethan's handwriting unmistakable. People say time heals everything, but I think time just makes the silence harder to explain. Claire stared at the sentence, her fingers trembling. She knew now, Miles may not remember Ethan, but somewhere inside him, Ethan still wanted to be found. Meanwhile, across town, Miles stood at the mirror in the shelter's bathroom. The flickering fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead. He turned his face slowly, examining the scar on his jaw, the faint curve of his hairline, the way his eyes sat slightly deeper on the right. He didn't know this face, but the sound of that piano stayed in his head like a ghost he hadn't made peace with. He whispered his name. Not Miles, Ethan. The word caught in his throat, foreign and familiar at once. Then, suddenly, he saw a flash, a cold tile, 2 voices arguing behind glass, a door slamming shut. He stumbled back, gripping the edge of the sink. The memory was gone as fast as it came, but it had come. And that terrified him more than anything else. Miles didn't show up the next day. Claire had made soup, the kind Ethan used to love, potato leek, extra pepper. She'd laid out a second bowl without thinking, waiting for the knock that never came. By noon, she called the shelter. They hadn't seen him since morning. He'd left quietly, taken nothing, just vanished again. Panic bloomed in her chest like wildfire. She tried to stay calm, telling herself maybe he needed space, that it was overwhelming. That memory didn't return on demand. But her gut knew better. Something had shifted after the piano, after she said his name out loud. Ethan. Maybe it was too much. Maybe she'd pushed him. Maybe the fear of becoming someone else was more terrifying than the comfort of being no one. She called Peter. "He's gone?" he asked, voice sharp. "Did he take anything?" "No, he didn't even say goodbye." Peter went quiet for a moment. "Do you still have the binder?" Claire looked at the bookshelf. "Of course. Check the police logs again. From the week Ethan disappeared. There was something? I can't remember. You mentioned a call once. A call you got that night." Claire's stomach dropped. "Yes, a blocked number. I answered and all I heard was static. I thought it was a prank." "Pull your phone records. If the number was logged somewhere, maybe it connects." That night, Claire sat in Ethan's room, binder open on the floor, phone records spread out in front of her. The call had come at 9:16 p.m., about 2 hours after Ethan had texted her. It lasted 24 seconds. No audio, no caller ID. But on a whim, Claire typed the call's timestamp into a search bar along with the keywords Deschutes River, Incident, October 2011. She didn't expect anything, but one article came up, archived, barely a paragraph. October 21st, a local man reported hearing shouting and a loud metallic crash near the abandoned West Ridge processing facility. No one was found. Police later said the structure had partially collapsed due to weather. Claire blinked. West Ridge. The facility had once processed sheet metal before being shut down in the early 2000s. It was on the edge of town, near the trailhead, and less than a half mile from where Ethan's car was found. Peter arrived within the hour. Together, they drove to the outskirts of Bend. It was nearly midnight by the time they reached the old West Ridge property. The gate hung loose, rusted and marked with faded no trespassing signs. Claire's flashlight barely cut through the mist rolling low across the ground. "This is where he might have been taken," Peter said quietly. "It's isolated, easy to access from the trail, and if someone wanted to disappear someone, this would have worked." The facility loomed like a forgotten skeleton, concrete and steel, broken windows, ivy curling through the cracks. They moved carefully, boots crunching over debris. A bird startled from the rafters above, wings thundering in the silence. Claire's heart pounded. In the back corner of the main hall, they found it. A locked steel door. The chain link kind. Claire's knees went weak. It was almost identical to the one in the photograph Detective Laura had shown her. Bent at the bottom. Hinges rusted through, but unmistakably the same type. Peter tested the handle. Locked. "Wait," Claire whispered. "Listen," a sound barely audible from the other side. A scuff, then nothing. Peter raised a hand to knock, but before he could, the door swung open, and Miles stood there. His face was pale, slick with sweat, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't speak, just stared at Claire like he wasn't sure if she was real. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're hurt. What happened?" "I don't know," he said hoarsely. "I don't know how I got here. I woke up here." Peter stepped forward. "Did someone bring you?" Miles flinched. "I think so. There was a man. I saw him before I passed out. He knew my name." Claire's voice was barely a breath. "What name?" "Ethan. They got him into the car. He was shaking." Incoherent. Claire wrapped him in her coat, trying to steady her own fear. They took him to Peter's clinic, bypassing the ER for now. Too many questions. Too many officials who had already failed them once. Inside the small exam room, Peter checked his pulse, his reflexes. He's been drugged. Not heavily, but something that causes disorientation. Possibly ketamine or a sedative. Claire sat beside the bed, gripping Miles' hand. He looked at her, eyes hollow. "I saw her." "Who?" she asked. "The woman from my dream, the scream. She was real. She was in that place. I think she was trying to help me escape." Claire's chest constricted. "Do you remember who she was?" He blinked slowly. "I think she said her name was Jocelyn." Peter froze. Claire turned sharply. "Who?" Peter whispered. "Jocelyn Ramos. She went missing in 2013. Another young adult. No explanation. No trace." Claire stared at Miles, and for the first time she saw it. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This was bigger, deeper, and far from over. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, shattering the uneasy silence. Claire glanced at the screen. It was Detective Laura Finch. Claire? Laura's voice was low but urgent. I've been going through some old case files and cross-referencing reports. There's something you need to see. Claire sat down, heart pounding. Minutes later, the three of them sat around Claire's dining table, a scattered mess of documents and laptops before them. Laura brought up a file labeled Operation Nightfall, a DEA investigation quietly shut down years ago. Peter leaned in, reading aloud. Nightfall was a covert sting targeting an international smuggling ring suspected of trafficking drugs, weapons, and even people through the Pacific Northwest. It involved collaboration between Mexican cartels and Eastern European organized crime, including Russian mafia factions. Claire's breath hitched. Ethan worked for the DEA? She whispered. Laura shook her head. He was a civilian, but according to some reports, he was doing informal research for a professor who had ties to an ongoing federal investigation. They suspect he stumbled onto something he shouldn't have. Peter's eyes darkened. That might explain the abduction. Across town, Miles sat alone in a dimly lit room at the shelter, the weight of the revelations pressing down on him. His mind was a storm, flashes of pain, confusion, and shadows that didn't belong to him. He pressed his fingers against his temples, willing the memories to stay buried. But they refused. He saw the red room again, chains rattling, a woman's desperate scream, and then the cold, hard gaze of a man he recognized, Officer Dmitry Volkov. The name echoed in his mind, unfamiliar yet chillingly close. Claire, Peter, and Laura made plans. They needed to find this Volkov, to unravel the threads binding Ethan's past, and to confront the darkness lurking in the shadows. Let me know when you're ready for Part 6B, where the confrontation with the kidnappers' network heats up and Miles' identity crises reach a breaking point. The night air was thick with tension as Claire, Peter, and Detective Laura prepared to meet an informant, a former insider with knowledge of Volkov's network. The address was a rundown warehouse on the edge of Portland, miles from Bend. Inside, the walls echoed with whispers of secrets long buried. Shadows shifted between crates and broken machinery. The trio moved cautiously. Suddenly, headlights flooded the loading dock. Figures emerged, armed, hostile. Chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the silence. Claire's heart pounded as she ducked behind a stack of pallets, clutching Peter's arm. Laura radioed for backup. Amid the confusion, Miles appeared, stumbling into the warehouse. His face was pale, eyes wild. "Ethan?" Claire called out. He didn't respond. Instead, memories flooded him, chains, cold steel, pain, and the agonizing loss of Jocelyn. Torn between the man he was and the man he wanted to be, Miles collapsed to his knees, trembling. Claire rushed to him, tears streaming. "You're safe now. We're here." But the darkness inside him fought to take hold. As police swarmed the building, arrests were made. Volkov's empire began to crumble. Yet for Miles, the battle had only just begun, between memory and identity, past and future. If this story touched your heart, please support us by subscribing to the channel. We share real, powerful, and emotional stories that deserve to be heard. Your support helps us create more meaningful content every week. Thank you so much for being here. The sterile white walls of the hospital room were a stark contrast to the darkness Ethan had endured. Claire sat beside him, holding his frail hand, feeling the faint pulse of life she'd prayed for all these years. The rhythmic beep of the monitors marked time passing, each breath a small victory. Peter and Detective Laura watched from the doorway, their faces tired but relieved. The arrests had been swift. Volkov and several associates were in custody, finally brought to justice after years in the shadows. But the scars on Ethan ran deep. He was emaciated, his once strong frame reduced to fragile bones. His eyes, though clearer now, held the weight of unspeakable trauma. Every small movement caused pain, but there was a spark, a flicker of recognition, of will. Claire brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're home," she whispered. Ethan's lips moved faintly. Home. Healing would be a long journey. Physical therapy, counseling, rebuilding trust. But for the first time, Claire dared to hope. Together, they faced the road ahead, uncertain but united. In a quiet interview room at the police station, Ethan sat supported by Claire and Peter. his voice a fragile thread as he recounted the nightmare. He described the warehouse where he was held, dark, cold, suffused with fear, the torture, the manipulation, and the faces of those who betrayed their duty. Ethan revealed how corrupt officials used their power to shield a smuggling operation entwined with drug cartels and organized crime, exploiting victims for leverage. He recited names and badge numbers, each one a crack in the web of deceit. The FBI agents listened, their expressions hardening. The information Ethan provided sparked a series of arrests and investigations. Justice was underway, but the cost had been immense. Claire held Ethan's hand tightly, tears flowing silently. They were finally beginning to expose the darkness and reclaim their lives. The days following Ethan's rescue were filled with quiet moments and painful adjustments. Claire watched as her son struggled to reconnect, not just with her, but with himself. Memories flickered like fractured glass, sharp and incomplete. At times, Ethan was distant, lost in his own mind. Other times, he clung to the smallest comforts, a familiar song, a shared meal, the warmth of a hand. Physical therapy sessions left him exhausted but determined. Peter continued to provide psychological support, guiding Ethan through the fog of trauma, helping him reclaim his sense of identity. Family dinners, once routine, became sacred rituals. They ate slowly, sharing stories from the past and hopes for the future. Claire treasured each smile, each spark of recognition. The journey was long and uncertain, but for the first time, they walked it together. Ethan sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The world felt both familiar and alien. Every face, every sound a reminder of the man he used to be and the man he was becoming. He opened a journal Claire had given him, the pages blank but inviting. Writing became his anchor, each word a step toward reclaiming himself. Claire often joined him, sharing memories and laughter, filling the silence with warmth. Peter encouraged him to face the past without fear, reminding him that healing was not linear. Ethan understood now. His identity wasn't just a name or a memory. It was the sum of his resilience, his love, and the hope they all shared. Together, they began to build a new future, one defined not by loss, but by the courage to move forward. The first light of dawn spilled gently across the horizon, brushing the sleepy town of Bend with soft hues of pink and amber. Claire stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, the crisp morning air filling her lungs with promise. Behind her, the house stirred awake, quiet footsteps, soft murmurs, the comforting rhythm of a family beginning anew. Inside, Ethan prepared for the day with a tentative smile, the weight of the past still heavy but no longer all-consuming. They had planned a small gathering, a circle of friends, neighbors, and supporters, to celebrate the courage it had taken to survive and to reclaim life. As the guests arrived, laughter and music filled the garden, weaving threads of connection and healing. Ethan, standing beside Claire, looked out over the crowd, the shadows of his past finally giving way to the warmth of this moment. As twilight deepened, Ethan and Claire walked to the old maple tree in the backyard, the place where countless memories had been made, where time seemed to fold in on itself. Ethan knelt and carefully buried a worn, faded jacket, the one he'd worn the night he disappeared. It was a symbol of the past he was ready to lay to rest. Claire smiled through tears, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You may have lost pieces of your past," she whispered, "but your soul has never forgotten the way home." Ethan looked up, eyes shimmering with both sorrow and hope. "Some things," he said softly, "can never be taken from us." They stood together beneath the branches, the first stars beginning to glow above, a quiet promise that even in the darkest nights, light finds a way. The journey was far from over, but for now, they had each other. And that was enough. We pour our hearts into these stories to bring you emotional, real-life mysteries that stay with you. If this story moved you, please support our team by subscribing to the channel, sharing the video with friends and family, and liking the video. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or feelings, and let us know, do you want to hear part 2? Every bit of support means the world to us and helps us continue bringing stories like this to life.